Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, Chinese hackers infiltrating 4 U.S. internet firms. Details on how they were able to find their way in. A top Biden aide is in China for the second day. He and China's top diplomat discussed setting up a new round of talks between President Biden and regime leader Xi Jinping. TikTok facing a lawsuit from a mother whose 10-year-old daughter died after attempting a viral challenge on the platform. What the court says about TikTok's role in the death. And Chinese entities found new ways to access U.S. artificial intelligence capabilities, how Amazon cloud services are reportedly involved. Four U.S. internet companies falling victim to an ongoing Chinese hacking group called Volt Typhoon. It's backed by the Chinese state and has been targeting U.S. infrastructure for 3 years. It's unclear which companies have been breached. A cybersecurity firm said Tuesday hackers compromised them by targeting a software platform called Versa Director. Many internet and IT service providers use this software. A former executive director of the top U.S. cybersecurity agency said China's hacking effort had dramatically stepped up from where it used to be. Volt Typhoon has infiltrated a good number of U.S. companies, spanning from telecommunications to energy, water, and other sectors. 23 pipeline operators were also targeted. Volt Typhoon also hacked hundreds of Cisco and Netgear routers this January. The director of the top U.S. cybersecurity agency said that Chinese cyber actors have found ways to live within a computer's operating system.
They're actually very, very hard to detect because they look like any other person who's operating on it, and they've elevated their ability to act like a system administrator. So you really can't tell that's a Chinese actor.
FBI Director Christopher Wray warned this April that Chinese hackers have infiltrated U.S. critical infrastructure.
We found persistent PRC access in our critical telecommunications, energy, water, and other infrastructure sectors. All of this with the goal of giving the Chinese government the ability to wait for just the right moment to deal a devastating blow.
PRC is short for the People's Republic of China, China's formal name since the communist regime took power.
From the FBI's perspective, these threats are not over the horizon. They're upon us now.
He did not make clear if the FBI had cut off the Chinese hackers' access. NTD reached out to the FBI for comment at the time. The agency said it didn't have anything to add to Wray's remarks. President Biden's top aide, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, is in China, meeting with top Chinese officials in Beijing. And after 2 days of talks, they've agreed to hold even more. A readout from the White House says that in coming weeks, President Joe Biden would speak with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. Top diplomats from both countries also agreed to host a video conference between their military commanders. Washington has stressed the significance of keeping communication lines open between the U.S. and Chinese militaries to prevent future conflicts in areas like the Taiwan Strait. Wang also raised the recent U.S. tariffs on a wide range of China-made goods, as well as U.S. export restrictions targeting Chinese chip makers. He voiced Beijing's disapproval. Sullivan's trip aims to ease tensions between the U.S. and China ahead of the U.S. election in November. On the final day of meetings on Thursday, the two sides are expected to discuss more topics where the two countries are at odds, like China's claims over Taiwan and in the South China Sea. Chinese-owned social media app TikTok is facing a lawsuit in the U.S. over the death of a 10-year-old girl. An appeals court has revived the lawsuit by a mother whose daughter died after taking part in a viral TikTok challenge. The Blackout Challenge dares users to choke themselves until they pass out. Tawina Anderson sued TikTok after her daughter Nyla died in 2021 after attempting the challenge. She alleges the social media platform's algorithm recommended the challenge to her daughter. The Third Circuit agrees. It said in a ruling yesterday, quote, TikTok makes choices about the content recommended and promoted to specific users. and by doing so is engaged in its own first-party speech. The latest ruling reverses a lower court decision to dismiss the lawsuit based on Section 230. The appeals court says that a social media platform's content that's curated using algorithms is not protected by Section 230. U.S. export restrictions on semiconductors to China are in the spotlight. That's as top diplomats from both countries meet in Beijing. At the same time, a report from Reuters says Chinese companies are finding new ways to access advanced American AI chips through Amazon cloud services.
According to a Reuters review of documents, Chinese entities tied to the state are using cloud services from Amazon and others to access American AI. Washington has restricted high-end AI chips from being sold in China, as they can help further Beijing's military capabilities. But there's a loophole. Entities can access AI models or servers that are powered by AI chips through cloud services, and it doesn't violate U.S. regulations. For example, China's Shenzhen University spent over $27,000 on an Amazon Web Services account. That's to access cloud servers powered by NVIDIA chips and use them for a project. The university sourced the service through a third party. Reuters found that at least 11 Chinese companies have tried to get a hold of U.S. cloud services. 4 of them said Amazon Web Services, or AWS, was their cloud service provider, though they accessed the services through intermediary companies. AWS controls about a third of the global cloud infrastructure market. It's also the 6th largest cloud service provider in China. Research Institute Zhejiang Lab also said in a document that it wanted to purchase AWS cloud computing services. That's because it couldn't source enough computing power from homegrown Chinese companies. A spokesperson for the lab said it did not follow through with the purchase. The U.S. government is trying to tighten regulations and restrict access to advanced U.S. computing through the cloud. Michael McCaul is the chair of the U.S. House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee. He told Reuters that the remote access loophole has been a concern of his for years. Congress introduced bills in April to give the Commerce Department more power to regulate remote access to U.S. technology, though it's unclear when it would get passed. The Commerce Department also proposed a rule that would require U.S. cloud computing services to verify users before granting them access to large AI models. If the users are found to use U.S. computing to train AI models that are capable of malicious cyber activities, the Commerce Department could limit or block access. The rule has yet to be finalized. A spokesperson for AWS said the company is aware the Commerce Department is considering new regulations and that the company complies with all laws in the countries where it operates.
The Securities and Exchange Commission is charging a China-based investment company and its CEO with fraud. The agency says Blake Young and his companies defrauded hundreds of people out of millions of dollars. Here's how.
The SEC alleges that Young courted investors to buy shares of a company called QZ Asset Management ahead of an initial public offering. Young proposed an IPO price of $5 per share for 60 million shares. That adds up to a total of $300 million. The SEC alleges that Young falsely claimed the company would use AI-based technology to generate extraordinarily weekly returns. And he promised 100% protection for client funds. Young and QZ then allegedly stopped communicating with clients and then took down their website.
On the campaign trail, former President Trump is promoting his plan to raise tariffs on imported goods, while Vice President Harris and some economists argue his proposed tariffs would raise prices for American consumers. NTD's Steve Lance spoke with Jeff Ferry, chief economist at the Coalition for a Prosperous America, for more.
Jeff Ferry, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Steve.
It's great to have you back with us, Jeff. So before we get into your analysis, could you sort of explain for us why some economists are arguing that higher tariffs would ultimately hurt the American people?
Sure. There's a lot of scare campaigns going on around tariffs at the moment, Steve. Economic theory that makes a lot of false and misleading assumptions. What our economic model shows is that if you levy a tariff on a segment of the U.S. economy What it does is it stimulates domestic production, creates more production, more jobs, and more investment, which are all good things. The price impacts are very, very small, so the overall economic impact is actually positive, not negative. And that's why, by the way, both President Trump and President Biden have used tariffs on a broad range of products, EVs, solar panels, and so on.
Some economists also criticize President Biden's expanded tariffs on China. A lot of people don't realize he expanded the tariffs on China. But you cite findings from the U.S. International Trade Commission last year that contradict this criticism. Tell us about that as well.
Yeah, the U.S. International Trade Commission study was the most detailed and authoritative study of the impact of tariffs on 12 sectors of the U.S. economy, ranging from things like steel to apparel. And what they found was that the price increase in a sector was on the order of 1/10 of the headline value of the tariff. In other words, a 25% tariff would lead to 2.5% price increase within that product segment. On the other hand, there would be a stimulus to domestic production within each of those segments, which would lead to more revenue, as I say, more jobs, more investment, and a productivity benefit as well. You know, a great example is to look at the 2018 steel tariffs, which Trump imposed in the early part of that year. The auto companies reacted by saying, oh, no, this could raise the steel price, and this could be a serious impact on our profitability. That was in 2018. In 2019, they reported higher profits, and when they were asked about the tariffs' impact, they said there is no material impact of steel prices in our financial results. Why was that? There were a couple of reasons. One was because the steel prices briefly rose and then fell back to a normal level. And the second reason was that the auto executives actually favored the steel tariffs because they created greater supply of a more secure source of supply, in other words, within the U.S., coming from the large steel companies that they were used to working with. So in many cases, the steel consumers favor the tariffs, although they will also complain about prices if...
Jeff Ferry, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Steve. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
Coming up, the House China panel is calling on the Commerce Department to probe a young U.S. business. They suspect the company is helping a blacklisted Chinese drone maker operate inside the U.S. Lawmakers raised concerns over national security. Pacific Island states rallying behind a multi-million-dollar Australia-funded plan, its goal to boost regional policing capabilities. We'll take a look at the strategy behind the headlines. And North Korea firing multiple rocket launchers with leader Kim Jong-un watching. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. U.S. lawmakers are now asking the Commerce Department to look into a new U.S. business tied to China's drone maker DJI. The move is part of Washington's efforts to tighten scrutiny on businesses and their affiliates that are linked to the Chinese Communist Party. The House China panel sent a letter to U.S.-based company Anzu Robotics last Tuesday, saying it appears that DJI is using Anzu as a pass-through company in an attempt to avoid current and anticipated U.S. restrictions on DJI products. The lawmakers pointed out that the U.S. company has a drone model that's almost the same as a DJI product, and that could expose U.S. know-how to Chinese manufacturers. The panel believes this could put U.S. national security at risk. DJI is already blacklisted by the U.S. Commerce Department as the company shares close ties to the Chinese regime and its military. Anzu CEO stated that the company is willing to comply with the investigation. Next, Pacific Island states have endorsed an Australia-funded plan to enhance policing capability in the region. It's valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. The plan comes as Canberra focuses on reducing China's influence in the Pacific. Let's zoom in.
Australia previously said there should be no role for China in policing the Pacific Islands. Canberra pledged over $270 million in funding the Pacific Policing Initiative. The plan will create a multi-country police force that can be deployed to countries for major events or emergencies. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese also said it will set up 4 police training centres across the Pacific, as well as a separate hub in Brisbane, a city on Australia's coast. It's worth noting China has been a major infrastructure lender in the region. It's now seeking a greater role in the military and policing, and even digital connectivity and media.
How seriously does the Chinese Communist Party take the Indo-Pacific region? China spent $15.3 billion on drills in the Indo-Pacific last year. That's about 7% of its defense budget. Reuters reported that figure, estimated by internal research from Taiwan's armed forces. Taiwan's defense ministry compiled a report earlier this year. The reports track China's naval and air missions in 2023. The estimated costs, not fully inclusive, but include fuel, supplies, maintenance, repairs, and salaries. China's military spending in 2023 totaled $220 billion, about 1/4 of the U.S. military budget. Worth noting, China's data did not include the spending in the private sector that also gets used to boost the Chinese military. Taiwan's defense ministry said, quote, "The Chinese Communist Party's enormous military investment in recent years indeed has a negative impact to the peace and stability in the region." It added that the spending is not conducive to global prosperity and development. The Philippines and China are accusing each other of ramming vessels and performing dangerous maneuvers in the South China Sea. It's the latest flare-up after the two nations agreed last month to better manage disagreements at sea. Here's more.
The incident occurred near Sabina Shoal in the early hours of Monday morning. China's Coast Guard said a Philippine vessel had ignored repeated warnings and had deliberately collided with its boat in an unprofessional and dangerous manner. The Philippines disputed Beijing's account, accusing it of imposing its version of facts. It said 2 Coast Guard vessels had encountered unlawful and aggressive maneuvers from Chinese vessels, resulting in structural damage to both vessels. The Chinese Coast Guard released this video of the incident, showing what it said was a Philippine Coast Guard ship deliberately ramming one of their vessels. The Philippines said the video is misleading. Here's the Philippines South China Sea Task Force spokesperson Jonathan Malaya.
Despite these incidents, both Philippine Coast Guard vessels remain committed to and shall proceed with their mission of delivering essential supplies to personnel stationed on Patag and Lawak Islands. The Philippine Coast Guard stands firm in its responsibility to ensure the safety and security of our maritime domain while addressing any and all threats to our national interest.
Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said China would continue to take lawful, resolute and forceful measures to safeguard its territorial sovereignty, maritime rights and interests. The US has condemned the incident and said it stands by the Philippines. Sabina Shoal is in the Spratly Islands, which are claimed by China, the Philippines, Taiwan and Vietnam.
North Korea tested multiple rocket launch systems Tuesday. State media released several images, one showing leader Kim Jong-un watching the launch, another showing rockets going up, then exploding. The images have not been independently verified. They come as South Korean and U.S. forces carry out annual exercises. On the other hand, North Korea has not taken part in recent military exercises with countries that support it, like China and Russia. North Korea is testing what are referred to as suicide drones. They're a type of weapon widely used in Ukraine and the Middle East. Here's a closer look.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un oversaw a test of homegrown so-called suicide drones over the weekend. That's according to state media on Monday, which released these images said to show Kim inspecting the drones on Saturday at North Korea's Drone Institute and looking on as they took off and destroyed test targets, including a mock tank. Also known as loitering munitions, they attack by crashing into the target with a built-in warhead. Such weapons have been widely used in the war in Ukraine as well as in the Middle East. The report said Kim urged researchers to develop artificial intelligence for the unmanned vehicles and called to ramp up production of suicide drones, including those that can be used underwater, as well as reconnaissance and multi-purpose attack drones. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said on Monday they were monitoring North Korea's military activities and were prepared for any provocations. When asked about visual similarities between some of the drones in the images from Kim's Saturday visit and those used and produced by Russia, a spokesperson said more analysis was necessary.
Now we turn to Hong Kong. As a former British colony, the city's residents lived in freedom and under the Western rule of law. But since it was handed back to the Chinese Communist Party, concerns have been rising about an erosion of rights there. Beijing has been intensifying its grip on the city for years. More and more people are moving out of Hong Kong, and businessmen there are also distancing from China. One of them is Hong Kong's richest man, Li Ka-shing. His company CK Group is ramping up its European operations and scaling back its reliance on China. Nikkei Asia reporting that a subsidiary of CK Group applied for a secondary listing on the London Stock Exchange. On top of that, the group bought a number of companies in Europe, spanning sectors like property, ports, telecommunications, electricity, retail, and finance. The company said that investment decisions are made based on better returns, not location. Economist Xi Ling told Radio Free Asia that the move shows Hong Kong investors are pessimistic about China's economic outlook. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Coming up on NTD, stay tuned for America's Hope with Kelly Wright. Is education at a crossroads in America? Tonight, a discussion with Ken Tashi from Campus Reform about concerns over protests against Israel and America on college campuses. Plus, artist and homeschool teacher Barbie Rivera shares her reasons for launching a homeschooling program in Miami. That's tonight at 10 p.m. after China in Focus. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.